Hello and welcome. You are watching Middle East Matters on France 24. Coming up in this show, why has Israel this week moved to officially recognise the Armenian genocide, the killing of around 1.5 million people by Ottoman Turks over a century ago? Well, it's not a question with easy answers, and the ripple effects could be widely felt. In Turkey, where President Erdogan has pointed to the allegations that Israel itself has committed a far more recent genocide in Gaza, but also in Azerbaijan, a key ally of Israel and of Ankara. And what of Armenia itself? Unusually, Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has not welcomed the recognition of the genocide. Instead, he has accused Israel's Foreign Minister Gideon Saar of weaponizing what happened. Our report is by Emerald Maxwell.
It's been widely viewed as a political move. Israel has announced it's to recognize the massacres of Armenians during World War I as a genocide.
This shocking genocide, which took place over 100 years ago and whose historical facts cannot really be disputed, included the murder of 1.5 million souls and the destruction of an ancient cultural and historical heritage. In my eyes, it is our moral duty as Jews, and certainly as the nation state of the Jewish people, to make this decision that we made today.
Till now, Israeli governments had avoided formally recognizing the Armenian genocide, in part to preserve relations with Turkey, once one of Israel's closest regional partners. But the decision comes as their relations have deteriorated since the 2000s, after Recep Tayyip Erdogan came to power, emphasizing a more vocal defense of the Palestinian cause. An Israeli raid on a Gaza flotilla in 2010, which killed 9 Turkish activists, and Israel's war on Hamas in Gaza from 2023 further strained relations, with Erdogan emerging as one of the fiercest critics of Israel's conduct, regularly accusing it of genocide.
We pay absolutely no attention to the slanders against our country by this criminal network, which has the blood of 73,000 innocent Gazans, mostly children and women, on its hands. Our history is free from genocide, massacres, oppression, and colonialism.
On the eve of World War I, there were 2 million Christian Armenians living peacefully side by side with Muslims as the Ottoman Empire began to collapse around them. By 1922, there were fewer than 400,000. Accused by the Young Turk government of being traitors and siding with the Russians at the outbreak of the war, Armenian intellectuals were systematically arrested and executed. That escalated into mass killings and deportations, with Armenians forced onto death marches from their ancestral lands. Armenians have long sought international recognition that the campaign conducted against them from 1915 to 1917 amounted to a genocide. Turkey admits that many Armenians were killed, but it denies any genocide or intent, saying the deaths were part of the widespread fighting that took place in World War I. But nowadays, most historians refer to it as the Armenian genocide, and as of 2026, 34 countries have formally recognized it as such, including the United States in 2021 and France in 2019.
Well, let's go to Jerusalem on the programme next and get the view on this story from our correspondent there, Noga Tarnopolsky. Noga, what is your understanding of why Israel's foreign minister is trying to push this change through now?
Good to see you, Nadia. I think, first of all, we have to take a step back and see if Israel really is making this recognition formal or is just making a statement that's aimed to provoke Turkey. I say this because for Israel to actually recognize the Armenian genocide as a genocide, it has to be brought to a vote in parliament, in the Knesset here in Israel, and that's not even scheduled in the 2 weeks we have ahead of the summer break. So this may have been really a provocation. And if so, it appears to have been quite a careless one by the Israeli foreign minister or by the Israeli government, because Israel appears to have been caught by surprise by both the sharp reaction from its close ally, Azerbaijan, and the dismissive rejection it got from Armenia itself. And I think, from the best of my ability to find out what happened this week, The foreign minister simply felt that he had to do something to get some attention and thought that this little slap at Turkey maybe could help Israel's position, or maybe even reach the White House, where Israel's trying to stop a possible potential sale of powerful fighter jets to Turkey.
And look, Noga, I appreciate what you're saying, that this hasn't been officially ratified yet by the Knesset. It may indeed not happen. But if it does, what kind of impact, briefly, do you think that this will have?
Well, interestingly, I doubt that it will have any impact on the potential American sales to Turkey. I think that there's significant American opposition to the sale of the possible sale of F-35 jets to Turkey. Even Republican senators have come out against this. The U.S. military opposes this, even though Turkey's a NATO ally. But Turkey under Erdogan really has become a NATO ally on the edge. It has housed Hamas offices in Ankara and Istanbul. It's a problematic member of NATO, and so it would be hard for Donald Trump to push that through Congress. We don't know what will happen again in the midterm. So I think that the direct effect is likely to simply be blowback against Israel, even a greater worsening of the diplomatic ties between Turkey and Israel. And Israel will now have to find a way to patch things over with important allies like Azerbaijan and with new possible diplomatic relationships like Armenia. A remarkable thing to say, given how degraded Israel's international standing is, that this kind of a move would have been made so carelessly this week.
All right, Noga Tarnopolsky from Jerusalem, thank you so much. Well, the view from Israel there with Noga. And let's get a sense then of the Turkish, the Armenian reaction to this story. Joining me as well is Amberin Zaman. She is the chief correspondent for the Middle East news organization Al Monitor. Thank you so much for speaking to us here on the programme.
Thank you for having me. We're an American news organization, just a small correction.
Yeah, very pleased to have you. I want to play you, first of all, a soundbite from the Armenian Prime Minister, Nikol Pashinyan. Let's take a listen.
We believe that refraining from entering into the issue of the weaponization of the Armenian genocide is in the interests of the Republic of Armenia. We see no need to respond.
So Pashinyan there accusing Israel of weaponizing the Armenian genocide. What do you think he means by that?
Well, first of all, there's a lot of hypocrisy, isn't there, involved? Because where was Israel for all these years? It's pretty much accepted by leading historians and numerous parliaments, governments, that this was indeed a genocide, and a country that itself was, a nation, rather, the Jews, who were subjected to the worst of genocides. You would think they'd be among the first to show empathy and recognize this, but for the reasons that your correspondent explained, not wanting to upset Turkey, which used to be a very close ally of Israel, they didn't. But coming at this time, it's very nakedly cynical, of course, and Armenia sees that, not to mention the fact that Israel is a top ally, as you said, of Azerbaijan, and played a pivotal role in helping Azerbaijan defeat Armenia in two recent wars, in 2020 and subsequently in 2023, which saw Armenia lose all the territories that it had occupied in Azerbaijan in an earlier war in the 90s, but not just that, lose Nagorno-Karabakh. But in addition to that, and more significantly perhaps, is that Armenia at this time is engaged in rapprochement with Turkey, very much wants to establish diplomatic ties and have its land border reopened with Turkey. And of course, this type of, provocation, as you said, is entirely unhelpful. And Armenia itself, Pashinyan had said that genocide recognition has no part in this rapprochement effort, and is certainly not a condition that it puts to Turkey for advancing relations.
Yeah, and it is fascinating because, at least to my knowledge, this is the first time that Armenia has said, actually, we don't welcome the recognition of the genocide by any other country. I'm interested whether you have a sense of how Armenian people themselves are responding to this news. Do they support it, or are they trying to distance themselves as well? It is worth perhaps reminding our viewers that there are Armenians who live in the occupied Palestinian territories, who live in Israel. As we said earlier on in the programme, Israel itself has been accused of a genocide in Gaza. So is that a factor, do you think, in how Armenians are viewing this?
Excellent question. I would refer to the recent elections that we just had in Armenia, where Pashinyan won by a significant margin. And this is a man who, as I said, is actively engaged in reconciliation with Turkey, who has erased various symbols, Armenian symbols like Mount Ararat, from passport stamps, because he believes this provokes Turkey, and who is basically reframing in many ways Armenian national identity. And of course, Armenian people care deeply about the genocide. Some people reckon that up to 60% of Armenians living inside a modern-day Armenia are descendants of survivors of the genocide. Yet they want to look forward, not to the past. They want to move on. So I don't believe that this kind of provocation by Israel or cynical manipulation of history helps them in any way.
Well, let's talk about the Turkish response then. We played that clip from Erdogan earlier on in the programme saying, look, no country has blood on its hands like Israel does. We already know that Turkey and Israel have very poor relations. Indeed, they have done for more than a decade now, but they do still have some security ties. There are private commercial ties. Do you think that they will be impacted by this move?
Well, I don't think things can get any worse than they currently are, really, in terms of the sort of very, very hostile exchanges of rhetoric between these two governments. I think this is just another drop in that bucket. But the reality is that however much these two countries spar, there is no way that Israel and a NATO ally, a very significant NATO ally, Turkey, and let me remind your audience that next week Turkey will be hosting the NATO summit, and Donald Trump is coming with pledges to let Turkey have these very critical engines for its domestically produced fighter jets, that this would, be allowed to happen, any kind of physical, any blows, war, conflict, that there's endless speculation about. I really don't see that happening. And in the meantime, of course, however much Turkey says it's imposed a trade ban on Israel, Turkish goods still make their way to Israel. They're just labeled as going to Palestine. They go through third countries, including through Azerbaijan, apparently. And of course, you have all the oil of Azerbaijan being exported through a pipeline that runs to Turkey and that mainly goes to Israel. And that oil is used by Israeli fighter jets in the war against Palestine. Right. So, we need to remind ourselves of those realities before we jump to conclusions about conflict between Turkey and Israel. But relations are pretty rotten at this point.
Yeah, and look, as you've been saying, and as Noga, our correspondent, was saying, look, this is a story with really quite complex geopolitical ramifications. You've mentioned Azerbaijan a little bit. Let's talk about it in some more detail then. Azerbaijan is an ally of Israel, and it is a key ally of Turkey. Baku has criticised Israel, saying that its intention here to designate what happened as a genocide in 1915 is a distortion of historical facts. Do you think that this relationship between Azerbaijan and Israel will survive these clear tensions now, given that they have, as you've said, sort of significant security partnerships, the sale of oil for one thing, or do you think that actually this could really impact the relationship between the two countries?
Oh, I don't think it will impact it in any way. If Azerbaijan came out strongly on this, it's mainly because it's paying lip service to Turkey, which is its very strong ally. But in the meantime, I think we can be fairly confident that the security relationship between these two countries will remain as robust as ever. Of course, that security relationship gives Azerbaijan a strong in with the Trump administration, gives it leverage over Iran, which is its neighbor. And indeed, Iran has accused Azerbaijan of letting Israel use it as some kind of a launching pad for its espionage activities, and perhaps even more in this recent conflict. So I really don't think that we'll see any real damage. This is just, Azerbaijan making nice with Turkey.
Yeah. We have another minute or so left. I'd like to ask you finally, you talked about this possibility that Turkey and Armenia are getting closer together, that there could be some kind of actual restoration of ties. I know you've covered Turkey quite a bit yourself. How are the events of 1915 understood in Turkey today? Is there a growing recognition there that what happened was a genocide?
Well, that's an excellent question. And of course, for decades, the official line has been that there was no genocide of the Armenians. And if anything, more Turks were killed in that war than there were Armenians, which of course is total fiction. But interestingly, when Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the president, came to power in 2002, he was in a very different mode, a reformist mode, where he was doing all sorts of reforms that pushed the European Union to, in fact, however grudgingly, open full membership talks with Turkey in 2005. And part of that reform process included allowing free debate of our history and of the genocide, to the extent that in 2015, the centennial of the genocide, you had hundreds of Armenians from the diaspora travel to Turkey, travel to the southeast of Turkey, where much of this slaughter took place, and commemorate the genocide together with Turkish citizens who were beginning to understand what really happened. And right now, as I said, you have a rapprochement between these two countries. And of course, it's not quite going as quickly as one would have wanted to. And one of the problems here is that Turkey links progress in peace between Azerbaijan to progress in its own talks with Armenia. So there is that problem.
It's a complex story, but we appreciate you taking the time to break it down for us. Amberin Zaman talking to us here on Middle East Matters. Thank you so much. And that's a wrap for the programme this week. Thanks for watching.